Please welcome in his return to the stage, Harry, as he presents out his paper on approaching in-venue quality tracking from broadcast video using generative AI.
The clicker? Go forward or backwards? Back. Awesome. Thanks for that introduction. So my name's Harry Hughes, and today I'll be presenting on behalf of our paper, Approaching In-Venue Quality Tracking from Remote Broadcast Using Generative AI. Now, like all data-driven pursuits, the success of soccer analytics fundamentally hinges on the availability of data. Now, in soccer, the holy grail in this respect is having for every single game event data, which tells the time and location of all on-ball actions. These are things like passes, shots, tackles, interceptions, and having this paired with complete tracking data, which provides the continuous 2D locations of all players and the ball throughout the entire game. Now, together, event data tells you what's happening on the ball, and complete tracking provides you with the full picture. So what's the problem here? The problem is that for the vast majority of games played across soccer's global ecosystem, we simply don't have access to complete tracking data, which limits the depth to which we understand games. So what I'll be talking about today is our solution. So in our paper, we propose a method where complete tracking data can be generated at scale from all televised games. So just some background on soccer tracking. It's nothing new. It's actually been available for over 25 years, starting with systems like Prozone. Now, these early systems generated tracking via human labeling of player locations, and although they were extremely innovative for the time, they were simply too labor-intensive to scale. Now, this gave the rise to in-venue tracking. In-venue tracking automatically tracks players using computer vision along with multiple on-location cameras. And the big advantage of in-venue tracking is these cameras are installed at the stadium and collectively can perceive the entire pitch. And as a result, you can track where all players in the ball are at every frame in the game. However, the limitation of in-venue systems is they're extremely reliant on these in-venue cameras to be installed at every single stadium. And their high installation and management costs means that this has typically only been feasible across the most lucrative of leagues. So one potential solution for this is broadcast tracking. Broadcast tracking just tracks players from the publicly accessible broadcast feed, and the big advantage of this is you can scale for all televised games, both forward in time, but also for historical games too. However, the limitation of broadcast tracking is that it's incomplete. And what I mean by that is optical tracking systems, you can only track what you can see, and using this frame as an example, because you can only see 7 of the 22 players, you can only track these 7 players. And this leads to large portions of the game that are missing. So how much does broadcast tracking miss? Well, when the main camera is active, which it is 80% of the time, you can track the players that you can see, but any players outside the camera's receptive field will be occluded. Now, what this amounts to is for an average frame, 11 out of the 22 players will be occluded. Now, even more significantly is what happens when alternate views are shown, which they are 20% of the game. So this is things like close-ups of players, fans, or coaches, or on-screen graphics. Now, in these parts of the game, there's insufficient visual information to optically track any players. And what this means is, for these portions of the game, all 22 players will be missing. So this has a huge impact on the analysis that we can do from broadcast tracking. So in this example game, there are 400 events where we have no broadcast tracking available. Now, in a game as low scoring as soccer, where a few events can be the difference between 0-0 and 1-0, clearly we want to analyze every pass, and broadcast tracking, this is a huge part of the narrative here. If we just extrapolate this out, there'll be 7.5 million events across the world's top 50 leagues every single year with no broadcast tracking available. So the point that I want to highlight here is broadcast tracking leads to incomplete analysis. So just to summarize the problem we're dealing with, complete tracking, it's very crucial for analysis, but it's not widely available. And how we seek to solve this problem is we generate complete tracking data by imputing behaviors for agents when they are occluded in broadcast tracking. So what I mean by this, on the left we've got broadcast footage, in the center we've got broadcast tracking and event data, and on the right we've got our imputed tracking. Now, in this frame you can see, despite only being able to track a subset of the players in broadcast tracking, for the players that are occluded, we're able to predict accurate behaviors. And we do this at every single frame when the ball is in play in the entire game. Now, in this play that I'm about to show you, there's a close-up that lasts for 9 seconds. And in these 9 seconds, we get no broadcast tracking. Importantly, in these 9 seconds too, we miss 3 passes. However, from the event stream, we see the time and location of these passes, and as a result, we're able to reconstruct what we missed. So I'll just play this forward. Continuously, we generate behaviors for all players in the ball in our imputed tracking. And the close-up that starts here, we're still able to generate an accurate ball trajectory here, reconstructing these 3 passes. And we do this from the event stream. Now, what's so important about this too is broadcast tracking misses 400 events per game. With our imputed tracking, we no longer miss any events. So just to contextualize how this actually works within recent advances in AI, large language models such as ChatGPT have shown amazing capacity to learn from text-based data streams. But the more recent insight has been an understanding that although humans use natural language as the foundation for all communication, to communicate a lot of concepts with more granular details, humans tend to communicate these ideas either visually or verbally. And as a result, more recent large language models, such as GPT-4, still use text as the foundation, but they supplement this understanding of language with understanding of images, video, and audio. And collectively, this enables them to learn the language of humans. Now, given the success of this, similar approaches have been seen in autonomous vehicles. In autonomous vehicles, it's really important to be able to accurately forecast where other cars are going on the road. So what companies like Waymo do is they learn the language of driving. Now, the language of driving is very different from the language of humans. At the foundational layer, it's the road's geometry, and greater precision is provided by vehicle-specific trajectories as well as traffic light signals in the area. So back to our task, we're trying to predict where players in the ball are when we can't see them. We've got to learn the language of soccer. So the language of soccer is different once again. At the foundational layer, it's event data. Event data is great because it provides 100% coverage of the events in the game, which is crucial when reconstructing the parts of the game that broadcast tracking completely misses. Another advantage of event data is it's labeled reliably and at scale by humans, and as a result, it's bounded to reality. However, what event data misses is it only really tells us what's happening on the ball, and it misses a lot of precise agent behaviors away from the ball. So we get this greater precision from broadcast tracking. Broadcast tracking, we've said that it's heavily occluded, but it does give these precise agent behaviors both on and off the ball. And together, if we use these 2 data streams, process them using deep learning techniques, we are able to predict realistic agent locations at every single frame. However, there is a second task that we care about here. Tracking data isn't just spatial, it's also temporal. And we also need agent trajectories to be photorealistic over time. So to achieve this, we take inspiration from other AI domains where photorealism is a key concern. So in generative art. So generative art typically generates images using diffusion. Diffusion's a big buzzword at the moment, but all it means is when data, say an image, is generated via iterative denoising from a random sample. So this is what a random sample looks like in images. And what diffusion does is it gradually removes noise up into the point where you're left with a very realistic image. And this is so successful in generative art because images have a lot of these fine-grained details, things like lighting conditions, shadows, and object edges, and diffusion allows machine learning models to gradually hone these over time. Now, we're not dealing with images, we're dealing with tracking data, but tracking data also has a lot of fine-grained details. Now, here we're talking about making sure that players have realistic, smooth human motion. So here we use a diffusion-based generative approach, starting from a random sample, random trajectories, remove noise over time, up into the point where we're left with extremely smooth, realistic player motion. So just to summarize our approach here, we use large amounts of the language of soccer, process them using deep learning, and use a diffusion-based generative approach on top. And this allows us to both predict realistic locations for occluded agents and produce photorealistic trajectories over time. Now, for full technical details and results where we compare our method against various other state-of-the-art approaches, please read our full paper. But really what I want to talk about now is, firstly, what this approach lets us do, And secondly, why is this so important for soccer analytics? So what this approach lets us do is we can now generate complete tracking data in a scalable way across all televised games. And why this is so important is because it lets us unlock the rich suite of evaluation tasks that rely on having complete tracking data, letting us understand and analyze games where previously this just wouldn't have been possible. So here I'll just focus on one of the many applications of complete tracking data, which is predictive pass analysis. So predictive pass analysis lets us understand the types of passes that were and weren't made in a game. So for every pass, for every passing option, we can understand and extract the following metrics like expected receiver. That's the likelihood of a player being the recipient of a pass. And expected pass completion. That's the likelihood of a certain pass being successful. And thirdly, expected threat. That's the likelihood of a team shooting in the next 10 seconds if a certain pass was played. Now, previously, if we're just using broadcast tracking, we can't really do these types of analyses. So this pass occurs when a close-up happens, and to understand the types of passing options that exist, it's important to first understand where the players are. And this isn't just a trivial one-off example here. In this game, there are 150 passes that occur where we have no broadcast tracking. Now, contrast this with our imputed tracking. Where we can't see agents, we generate highly realistic behaviors and locations. And as a result, for this pass, even though it occurs during a close-up, we can quantify who the most likely receiver is, or what are the most threatening passes, or thirdly, what passes are most likely to be successful. So we can also aggregate this out at the game level and answer really interesting soccer analytics questions, like which team had the most threatening key passes, or which players most frequently chose the safest pass, or thirdly, which players were available for the highest percentage of their team's passes. Now again, what I really want to highlight here is previously, if we didn't have complete tracking data, you can't really do these types of rigorous analyses. So just finally, for some future improvements, it's really around fine-tuning. So currently, we just assume all players to be the same, but especially when players are recruited for large periods of time, it's very important to understand how players are different from each other. So I use the example here of Mo Salah and Jack Grealish. Although they're both nominally wingers, their positioning is very different. Mo Salah typically plays as an inverted winger, narrowly in the pitch, whereas Jack Grealish likes to stay high and wide. Understanding these player-specific priors will allow us to generate more accurate behaviours. And the second improvement, it's really around using more event context. So especially for high-leverage game situations like shots and corners, there's a lot of rich details provided in the event stream. However, currently, we're only using a subset of what's possible. So expanding out this event representation will let us do a better job at reconstructing these important game situations. So just to summarize what I've talked about today, complete tracking, it's crucial for analysis, but it's not widely available. So here we use generative AI to create imputed tracking, which is complete, and it's a scalable way to generate tracking. And this, why we care about it, is it unlocks downstream analysis of games using complete tracking data where previously this wouldn't have been possible. So thank you for your attention today. I'll now take any questions.
Great job, thank you. Does the denoising really require like diffusion models, or can more standard, well understood Kalman filters, et cetera, be sufficient?
Well, I can't exactly speak to the Kalman filters part of it, but if you just use standard deep learning, deep networks to try to predict player locations, you do get a lot of bad artifacts. So you get player teleportations a lot, or player jumps. And because this tracking data, we want to use it for fitness metrics and things like that, we can't, that's really not acceptable. We need player trajectories to be smooth basically all the time. So diffusion's a really great way of doing that, just focusing on generating behaviors that are realistic and focusing on that realism rather than just at every frame predicting where this player's most likely location at this frame, and then at the next frame they might jump around, but that's really all deep learning, standard deep learning approaches can do.
And there's interdependency among teammates and opponents that constrain the and influence.
Yes, yeah. So in our network, we feed in the event stream and also broadcast tracking. So wherever there is any events or agent locations in the broadcast tracking, we feed that in, and there's cross dependencies. So every player is aware of where every other player was in that broadcast tracking segment.
And you're doing like a forward pass and a backward pass in time to, so when you do get back to the broadcast feed, the model, the imputation is going to dovetail right into where they actually are.
So regarding the forward and backward pass, we just do it all jointly. So we just do we chunk up the game into 3-minute segments and just impute those 3-minute segments jointly. So there's no forward and backward pass. It's not like an auto-regressive model in that respect.
Okay.
It's just joint, yeah.
All right, so this might be kind of a jerk question. It's not intended to be, but you keep saying realistic.
Yeah.
And you just said it a couple times. And I believe you. I think this is most likely very accurate, but accurate is the key, especially if you're going to do, follow-up analysis on, expected threat, expected, pass receiver, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is important to remember, we're not grandiose about what the model can do. It is still a projection, right? If you can't see where the players are, you've got to predict and estimate. However, what I would say is when people are watching broadcast, like soccer broadcast, people only see a subset of what's happening, but people are really good at interpreting, for example, what formation a team's playing, even though at any one time you probably only see half of where the team is. So I think it is a solvable task. There will be some stochasticity and randomness about where players are when they're off ball, but yeah, I think it's not just a complete generation. But you're exactly right? Like it is still a forecast, right? So.
Great, thanks. Super interesting. First, I just want to make sure I understood. So early on, you had this example where you had 3 passes that were off of the broadcast that you can see. So you know that there were three passes, and you're inferring where the people are, or are you also inferring that there were 3 passes that happened?
So no, good question. We know that there are 3 passes because we have event data. So event data is labeled at scale and reliably by humans. So, so we know based on that, humans saying there's a pass here, there's a pass here, there's a pass here. So we know that these 3 passes exist, and what we're trying to do is reconstruct the context and the behaviors around those 3 passes.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And this I think is going to come to Brian's question, because FIFA and others have tracking data for the systems where they have optical systems, and so to check whether you're actually doing something that's reflective of real soccer, you could take that optical tracking data, mask out part of it, infer the trajectories, and then compare. Is that something you have done or can do?
Well, you could definitely do that, and how we train these models and how we evaluate them is they're trained on games where we do have this matched data set. So we have the event data, we have in-venue, optical, highly accurate tracking, and we also have broadcast tracking. So this enables us to verify if the model's performing well. That's how we train it, but definitely we could, if you had a perfect in-venue stream, you could mask out part of it and then try to generate what you missed. Absolutely.
So actually this is super interesting. So you have the optical tracking data.
Yep.
So did you use all of that to train, or did you pull a third out and train on 2/3 and then test on the other third?
So we used 90% for training. So we trained this on 300 games of where we had those 3 data sets. Used 270 games for training, and we used 30 games for evaluation.
How'd you do?
Well, it's hard to just quantify in just a few words, but how we do quantify it is we measure the average displacement error. So the displacement between the predicted location for players and the ground truth or in-venue locations for players. And that's how we can verify that we are outperforming some good heuristics baselines and also some good deep learning baselines too.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Are we out of time? We have out of time? Okay, all right. I'll just go first next time. It's fine. All right. No, we're good. We're good. Well, I'll just say this.
Yeah, go.
Quickly. Peer pressure. First off, I think that you did good. I always look for a good summary. I thought your summary was really good. And I really like how you did the comparison with the wingers, because a lot of times people don't put that or factor that in. Quickly, one thing that I tell my students whenever they're putting something together is 3 things: be accurate, be timely, be interesting. Be accurate, be timely, be interesting. So with that being said, anytime when a student or someone pulls something like this together, so throughout this process, they always come with, they're faced with either an obstacle, obstacles, plural. What would you say was the biggest obstacle that you ended up facing when putting all of this together?
I think it really was realizing that we needed diffusion. So we put this work together, we can accurately predict where players are at every single frame. Great. Well, why are these players teleporting around the place? That was a genuine, a big problem that took us a long time to solve. And just realizing that tracking data, it's not just spatial, it's not just player locations, but it also is, it's over time, it's temporal. And you do need it to look realistic, because that's what tracking data, it's the first use case, right? It's visualization of plays. And so, yeah, I think that was the biggest obstacle that I faced. Yeah.
Okay. I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.